Welcome, everyone, to part two of the two series on the Great Depression and the New Deal. In this, we're going to talk about more the New Deal, how these programs helped get the United States out of the Great Depression. So there were two presidents during the time period of the Great Depression. The first one was Herbert Hoover, who was president when the Great Depression began. He institutes some programs that kind of start to see some recovery, but they're just not enough. Society wants more. They want to see more recovery. And he's ultimately blamed for the entire Great Depression and why it even happened. They put the blame on him. And so after him is Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes president, and he wants to act immediately to recover the country and use the government's resources, the federal government's resources, to help society out and get people back to work. Now, FDR has a Georgia connection. In the early 20s, FDR is struck with polio, and he comes to Georgia to Warm Springs to seek treatment. And they have these waters that are supposed to be healing waters and help relieve the effects of polio. They help him for a while, they make him feel better, but ultimately he never walks again. He is paralyzed and is the only president to ever be paralyzed and the only president to be elected to 4 terms. After his presidency is when they institute the 2-term limit. So he was a very popular president. He recovers the country from this horrible economic time period through his New Deal programs. And we're going to talk about 4 of those programs that really impacted Georgia. And FDR got the idea for some of these programs from his time in Georgia. The first program is the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. Now, all of these New Deal programs they've got a nickname of alphabet soup because they have all these letters to represent what their names were, like CCC. You can see here in the image that the CCC worked on environmental projects, conserving the nation's natural resources at our national parks, building the Appalachian Trail. And it only had young men, 18 to 24, younger, college age, just out of college men to work in this program. The second program is the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA. And this program paid farmers to not grow certain crops because prior to the Great Depression, they had been overproducing some crops. And because when a crop is overproduced, it makes the price go very low, and so the farmers don't make any money. But if there isn't as much of the product available in the market, say cotton or peanuts or tobacco or whatever the product is, if buyers don't have as much as they want, it makes the price go higher. And so then farmers can make more money, and the more money they make, they get out of their economic depression, and farmers can then become more successful and begin to survive. So the government literally paid farmers to not grow certain products, so it would restrict the supply and drive the prices up. The third major program, and this one in particular really comes from FDR's time in Warm Springs, Georgia. When he got there was no electricity in that rural part of Georgia. And he was a very wealthy man from New York, and so he paid to have electricity run to the little White House, they called it, where he stayed when he was in Warm Springs getting his treatments, because he wanted to have electricity. He wanted to have electric lights and things. And so from his time and seeing the devastation and seeing how not having electricity made the lives of the people out there very difficult, he institutes this program, which if a company wanted to get a loan, and they would give them a very low interest rate loan, an organization or a company, they could then build power lines to rural areas. So by 1950, almost 100% of Georgians have electricity, and that's a huge increase from the 3% rate of 1935. The fourth major program, which still exists today, is the Social Security Act. And the way that this act works is in your part of your paycheck, you would contribute to your Social Security. And then when you retire, the Social Security will pay you income when you're retired. Now, today, by today's standards, Social Security isn't enough to survive day to day, but it's more just supplemental income to whatever retirement accounts people create for themselves as they work today. But when the main purpose of Social Security was to be the retirement account for people when they were working. But today it's just gotten where it can't keep up with how expensive things are, and we just don't pay enough into it to survive when we retire. And people live longer today as well, so Social Security just doesn't have enough money in it to survive the length of your life either. Now, governor of Georgia during this time period was Eugene Talmadge. And Talmadge and Roosevelt were political rivals. They did not see eye to eye on things. Talmadge is a huge favorite of farmers and most Georgians at this time. He really fights for farmers' issues. Though he resists efforts to kind of gain more civil rights for African Americans, and this leads to UGA losing its accreditation because there were some faculty members there that wanted to integrate the school, and so Talmadge forces the university to fire those faculty members, and he will not allow integration at the university. Talmadge believed in low taxes. He wanted limited government. He didn't want the federal government getting involved, and that's why he was so opposed to FDR and the New Deal, because it was so much federal government involvement in people's lives, but it was needed federal government involvement. But ultimately, his opposition to the New Deal programs creates a lot of negative publicity for the state. And Talmadge kind of gets, a little bit of bad press for that, but people still really like him. But he served as many terms as he can. Governors couldn't serve consecutive terms in 1936, so Talmadge is not eligible to run again, and E.D. Rivers is elected. And New Deal, and he's in favor of the New Deal, so the New Deal programs get instituted in Georgia. Now, again, like I said, Talmadge is still very popular, and people even begin to see him as a potential to run for president against FDR, which ultimately he wouldn't have won. FDR was so incredibly popular. So for decades, Georgia's Democratic Party had been divided between big government Democrats who supported the New Deal and small government pro-farmer Democrats who supported Talmadge. And so ultimately, kind of the state's political ideals begin to shift towards that big government kind of Democrats. And because they know that the New Deal is needed. Okay, so hopefully the New Deal programs made sense. If you've got questions, please ask in class. Come see me in the mornings. We'll talk about them. But ultimately, the New Deal is the economic recovery that the country needs to revitalize itself. It's not the last factor that gets the country out of the Great Depression. That ends up being World War II. That gets the country out of the Great Depression, because we get to have even more jobs because they have to create all this industry to build the war products and things. So it puts a lot of people even more people back to work. So that's the ultimate final thing that gets the country out of the Great Depression. But without the New Deal, the war probably would not have been enough to get them out of the Great Depression. Those New Deal programs really got it started and rolling and getting the country out of the Great Depression. So here are your quiz questions about the New Deal. These will be on Edmodo. Again, just matching just the 6 questions that you see here, and you will get your automatic score and know what your quiz grade is. And shoot me messages on Edmodo again, or come see me in the mornings, ask in class if you have questions about the New Deal.